Hello everyone, Mr. E here, and welcome to the class spotlight for the Hive Scum, Darktide's 6th character class. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and thank you of course to Fat Shark for having me on your channel and sponsoring me to make this video. We have so much to get into though. The Hive Scum is all about speed and aggression, so we should just rip right into things. We're going to be kicking it off by talking about the weapons the class has, the whole arsenal, but focusing on the exclusive weapons. Then we'll pivot over to the talent tree where we'll check out the abilities as well as all of their ability modifiers, the class's keystones, and their blitzes. And we are also, of course, going to check out the custom stims and how those can be built and change your build entirely. That is so much to cover, and it barely grazes the surface of everything going on with this class. So if you want a deeper dive into all of the weapons, all of the talents, build guides, and more, you can check out my channel, which is linked in the description. However, this class cannot be done justice with words alone, and I'm sure you guys are dying to get a look at it in action. So without further ado, here's some of that. Oh, I'm just standing on top of a demon host.
Watch that demon host, yeah.
I think I would murder this thing in like approximately 3.2 seconds now, so.
Yeah, we could try it.
Yeah. I guess there is no real point to winning if you don't do something cool. Oh wait, hold on, we gotta kill this thing. This should take a long time.
LOL, 99 problems and a demon host is not going to be one.
Yeah, I would say the demon host is going to be kind of...
Oh my god. Holy... Is that tack axe?
Yeah, it's tack axe. Let's start with weapons, guys. There are quite a few to look at today, and a lot of them are very, very fun and powerful on this class, because this class has a unique way of making even lesser weapons in the arsenal really stand out, and that is just so awesome. But we want to look at the weapons that are new for this class. So let's go ahead and check out all the weapons that are available. These are the 10 melee weapons you can get access to with this class. Some classics are reappearing, like Tack Axe, which is very, very good, and Combat Axe, which is very, very good. But we've got some new ones, right? Shiv, Crowbar, and Bow and Saw are brand new. So let's start by checking those out. We are going to first look at the Shivs, which are a very special weapon indeed. Darktide's first dual-wielded weapon, or dual-wielded melee weapon, where you can attack with both hands. But I don't think that it's like, you know, too revolutionary. What I would really love to see in the future for Darktide is some ability to switch up what weapon you hold in both hands, or perhaps some mix and match, like one axe, one dagger, something similar to what we saw in Vermintide 2. I think that's definitely not something I would be opposed to. But for right now, having a dual-wielding weapon is pretty cool, but that's not really the cool thing about it. The cool thing here is that we have some really awesome attack animations, just some nice cleaves with those left and right jabs. We also have this overhead sort of smash down, which does pretty solid damage, and then a follow-up attack where you twin your daggers in front of you and do kind of a chew right into the enemy's eye. Of course, this is a crit-focused assassination-style weapon, very similar to the combat blade that exists in the game already, but it has an additional trick up its sleeve. That is that it can be thrown as a throwing knife. So Zealots, you're probably very familiar with this mechanic, but you notice that that throwing knife actually applies a damage over time effect. It applies this class's unique damage over time effect called Toxin. And Toxin is very special indeed, because Toxin ignores armor, more or less. You can see this does quite a bit of damage through armor. And yeah, that is very, very potent, because this class, or this weapon, is now has an additional ability to deal with not only ranged targets, but armored targets, because enemy like this Crusher here just takes a couple of daggers, and he will now be toxined to death. Hitting them in the head or critting with those throws does indeed matter. It increases the toxin stacks that are applied. And you get stacks back when you kill elite enemies. So it's very similar to the Zealot Dagger in that front. But this is not the only unique weapon in the class. It has a unique weapon special for certain, but that's something they've really cooked on with all the weapons of this class. We all have very, very cool weapon specials, and we're going to talk about the Crowbar next. The Crowbar is a really simple weapon, as you might imagine, right? It's just a hunk of metal. And with its normal form, we get these large sweeping strikes and overhead blunt attacks that have high stagger values. We can really bully these enemies around, and that's not something that many weapons on this class can say. As you saw, we have tack axes and knives and daggers. Those sort of weapons don't really stagger very much. This weapon is where your stagger's at. You can bully these enemies around and give them the concussion of a lifetime. But if you want to give them a little more than a concussion, you can activate the weapon special and change into the just criminal mode, where we are going to split these enemies' skulls open. You will hit them, and then you'll rip it out and tear, I guess, their skull plate off in the back. Very effective. As you can see there, it does not care at all about what damage reduction their armor might have. Not even a challenge for it. And keep in mind, this is all going on with none of my combat buffs active currently. So this weapon can get so much more powerful than what you are currently seeing. Just by the application of a few talents. But yeah, this is the crowbar. Really simple. It's even its light melees are strike downs like that. So if you've got heavy armored targets, you're just going to go for this mode. If you've got lots of targets and want to do sweeping strikes and knock them back, you're going for this mode. Really simple, really elegant, very good weapon. Let's check out the last exclusive melee, which is the Bone Saw. And the Bone Saw is another weapon that has a very cool weapon special. In fact, it seems to have something very interesting going on here. As we can see when we check out the Bone Saw's blessings that I've equipped it with, it's really focused on stacking up damage on the same enemy. This is a great single target killer. It can get increased weak spot damage against enemies inflicted with Chem Toxin. And just from looking at the blade, you can probably tell there's something going on with that. This Chem Toxin just applies when you melee enemies, and it, of course, does what Chem Toxin does, which is sizzle away and eat them to death. But when we turn over to an armored enemy like this, it doesn't really take all that much damage from this Chem Toxin. It takes a lot longer to stack it up to an effective value, and yeah, it can struggle against armor, unless you apply the purple toxin. Now the purple toxin, this toxin applies brittleness to your target. So now this target is going to start taking massive, massive chunks from each hit. In fact, I could do that a lot better and actually just like tap them a couple times and then give them the big wallop and do something like that. So this weapon can not only stack up this Chem Toxin that will allow you to chunk the health of the bosses and things like that, but it can also convert itself to a brittleness, a damage increasing, applying debuff. I think that's very cool being able to have both of those, and I also really like this purple effect. It's a very pretty looking weapon. I like the class handles this blade with a rag. I think that's an abundance of precaution that we should all have when we're handling something that looks like this. Let's go on and talk about range, guys. We have got these 11 range weapons. The bolt pistols hanging out way down here. You can't barely see it, but these are the other ones that we're going to talk about. We've, of course, got our auto guns, the braced auto gun, infantry auto gun, vigilant auto gun. These have shown up on this class. I was really hoping they would. I was really hoping this class would have something that could take them to the next level, especially when I saw that Desperado ability, and for certain it can. But then we've got things like the revolver, the double-barreled shotgun, and of course the class exclusives, the dual auto pistols, the needle pistol, and the dual stub pistols. Let us check them out. Range weapons are up next, and we're going to start with this, the Needler. What a unique weapon. This weapon is very strange, even among the roster of Darktide. It doesn't really care about its direct damage. In fact, it doesn't even have any blessings that are devoted to direct damage. All it cares about is applying its damage over time effect, the toxin effect. As you can see here, pretty dang effective. It cuts through enemies that have that amount of health, no problem. A couple of doses will kill a Mauler. Maybe like 4 doses or so will kill ourselves a Crusher, no problem. And it has an alternate fire, which turns it into the blue mode. And this blue mode detonates and causes the enemies around it to get poisoned by the remaining stacks of toxin. So pretty cool. Can do some horde clear, can do some single target killing, doesn't really care about armor, so it's a good armor remover. The problem with the weapon is it does take a while to actually kill. So if I'm being chased down by this Crusher and I get a couple stacks on him, he's still got this much time to do what he needs to do to me, as opposed to other weapons which can take him out in a couple of seconds. Same thing applies to gunners and stuff, right? They get to live during this time instead of just dying outright. And that can be a downside. It also has pretty low ammo capacity on the grand scheme of things, and the reload is a little bit long, but very cool weapon nonetheless, and a good sidearm for a lot of builds because of the high effective damage from a single shot that can just instantly kill an elite. We're going to go on and check out a very different weapon, the dual auto pistols, which are all about upfront damage. No precision or finesse required here. We just do this. And of course, we can go gangster style. You know, when you need like a little bit more accuracy for your just absolute blind spraying, this weapon, it will tear through your ammo and also the enemies. And it's very cool. Of course, it doesn't have very good damage against armor, but there are some things in the class that can counteract that. We'll get to those in a little bit. I want to finally look at my favorite exclusive weapon for this class, which is the dual stub pistols, the dualies. These things rock. If Rule of Cool was, you know, the way we were judging these things, these would absolutely win. And first, of course, we have pretty solid damage. We're just going to go blam, 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 and start blasting on these dudes. Of course, we can also go gangster style with these and get a little bit more accuracy. But say you're a good clip away from the enemy and you still want to get that headshot. Well, I mean, you might miss sometimes, you might hit sometimes, but you know, as any trained marksman who can tell you, the best way to get an accurate shot with a pistol is to do this. So that is the weapon special for this thing, is you can twirl your gun around, and then as the reticle closes down, you'll need to actually fire the weapon again at the appropriate timing. So it's like a little miniature quick time event, and that gets you your headshot. So that is very nice to be able to snipe off some of these like specials and stuff, or just missing casually, and that you might otherwise miss with your big broad spray downs. And yeah, I love it. I love these weapons. As I said before, how this makes any sense for making your weapon more accurate is beyond me, but it is very, very cool. And I think that's one thing the weapon 100% nails. So yeah, that's why it's my favorite. Now, we have to start showcasing some of the talents. And we're going to start with the one that takes these weapons I just showcased and makes them even cooler. Because what's cooler than a set of dual-wielded pistols? Well, a set of dual-wielded pistols that have infinite ammo. And of course, I'm talking about Desperado, the ranged ability for this class. This ability swaps to and reloads your ranged weapon instantly, which means that you should be draining the entirety of your first magazine of your weapon and then pressing this button to snap that instant reload off. This reload and all reloads during this ability's duration do not cost any ammo to you, which is amazing because this class would absolutely guzzle ammo otherwise. This ability only lasts for 10 seconds. However, when you are in proximity of enemies, all close range enemies are going to be highlighted in blue, and if you kill them with a ranged attack, you will add a full second to that timer up to that cap of 10 seconds, and you can extend it up to 20 additional seconds before you start to see diminishing returns from each additional close range kill. And during its duration, you also get full immunity to ranged attacks. The targets will still shoot at you, but they will not be able to damage you, and you can also sprint with no stamina cost, and you get 20% sprint speed. It is super fun, super liberating to be able to fire so much ammo without regard for your ammo count, and it has a 45-second cooldown. Let's check out its little ability modifiers over here. We of course have a classic cooldown modifier such as Focused Resolve, which gives you half a second ability cooldown off when you kill an enemy that is highlighted. Very easy to max out here, but it's only going to give you 5 seconds back. I really don't think it's all that worth it. What is worth it is weak points in the armor, which is going to give you 15% rending when this is active, which helps a little bit with armored targets. And then of course you also get up to 15% range damage when you're killing those highlighted targets, which is every enemy within close range. Very, very easy to get 15% damage here. Definitely worth the point. Now, Desperado enables you to go absolutely ham with ranged weapons, but perhaps we need to talk about the melee equivalent, which is called Rampage. Rampage is the Slayer Barden equivalent in this game, and it goes seriously hard. It is unapologetic in the amount of sheer melee power it gives you. Again, just like with Desperado, Rampage only has a 10-second duration, but by playing aggressively and staying on enemies and killing enemies and hitting enemies, you can extend that duration for a very, very long time. During this duration, you gain 100% melee power, 20% attack speed, and 25% damage reduction, and you become stun and suppression immune. Activating this ability also gives you all of your toughness back out of activation, which it does not say in the tooltip. And while it is active, every time you melee an enemy, you get 0.3 additional seconds added to this timer, up to a maximum of 20. You can juice this for a very, very long time with some of the add-ons I'll talk about in a second. The downside here is that when Rampage ends, you are exhausted for the next 5 seconds. You gain extra damage taken, and you have less stamina regeneration speed for that 5 seconds. So you want to make certain that when you come out of this, you are not in a really vulnerable state. You are going to be kind of gassed for the next couple seconds there. But it's very easy to kill every enemy on the screen with this, thanks to some of these little additions we have here. In fact, the one I really think is critical is Boiling Blood. Boiling Blood means that melee strikes against elites and monsters give you an additional 1 second, and that diminishing time is now 30 seconds. So if you're fighting on a higher difficulty, you're going to be able to stay in this ability all day because there's so many more elites and monsters to feed your timer off of. Then we have up here Channeled Aggression. This is an additional 25% rending with heavy attacks when you're over 50% on that timer. I think this is probably not all that good because 25% rending, it really only is effective against those carapace armored enemies like Crushers, and you have to be above 50% duration on that rampage. So it's got 2 qualifiers there that it's not all that useful for. Down here we've got Forge's Bellow, which is going to stagger enemies back in the sort of way that the Veteran Shout does when you activate it and when you come out of your rage. And this causes the enemies around you to have a slowing effect on their attacks. It makes them less aggressive, so you will be able to get more attacks in. Again, this is purely flavor. I don't think it's necessary for the power of the ability, but one thing that absolutely is, and is hugely impactful, is Pulverizing Strikes. Pulverizing Strikes gives you 50% cleave while Rampage is active, which is already a good buff, but additionally you will get 2.5% melee strength for every second you spend in Rampage, for a total of up to 25% strength. So between the 50% strength from the base ability and the 25% strength from this node, you are getting 75% additional strength, nearly doubling your damage output, and it just enables you to plow through hordes and bosses and elites alike. But I think by far the most interesting and potentially game-changing of all these abilities has to go to the Scum's third ability, that is the Stim Supply. The Stim Supply is a retrofitted Metacrate that you drop on the ground, and this thing looks kind of just like a Metacrate already in the game, except standing in its radius will cleanse your corruption, including from current wounds, which means it can reset wound states for you and all of your allies. Additionally, this also applies the effects of your custom stim that you design in the stim section to everyone in its radius. And this is where it gets truly game breaking, because some of these effects, when shared across all the members of the team, are very, very powerful indeed. Now, they are still powerful as of the release that you'll get, but if you check out my channel, you'll see that the original build that we played with on the test server had some very, very fun mechanics indeed with this, and in fact enabled perhaps the most broken build this game has ever seen, but I'll leave that to you to explore. Let's check out its ability modifiers here. We've got the Ease of Assembly modifier. That's going to make this stim supply become active whenever your stim finishes recharging. So you've got basically 2 cooldowns going, which means you're going to be able to drop so many more of these crates. Very, very impactful. Then we've got Shifty Craftsmanship, which is the DPS ability here. It makes the crate detonate when it's finished doing its aura thing and applies 5 stacks of chem toxin to nearby enemies. And this is pretty cool. It's like a little landmine that has a ticking time bomb that goes off. And 5 stacks of chem toxin is quite a lot. That kills pretty much every enemy in the game, up to, I think, a Mauler will not die to that. But it staggers them as well, so it's very, very nice. And it's especially nice when combined with this last one, Huff and Go. Huff and Go means that this box only lasts for 3 seconds, but everyone who touches its radius within those 3 seconds will get a 15-second buff for whatever the stim effects are. So it'll cleanse your corruption and it'll apply the stim to you for the next 15 seconds. And this also means that this ability here explodes after only 3 seconds. So you're not waiting around all day for the detonation. This is crazy. And now, guys, we have to see exactly why. And now we have to talk about the Stim Lab, which is where you will go to craft this class's exclusive custom stims, or they would be exclusive if you couldn't use the stim supply ability to share them with the whole team, and that's where this is going to get really, really crazy. But we had to first understand how this mechanic works, and it all starts with the volume over here. This volume is awarded as you level up your character to a maximum of 30 points at level 30. And as you allocate points here, you can see my volume is reducing, but each point in a chain is more expensive than the ones preceding it, as the effects tend to get stronger, especially these last 2 effects, which are generally differentiating the trees and making them have unique effects that favor certain sorts of builds over others. Now, the other thing that's going on as I allocate these points is I am raising the cooldown of this stim. And that's a very important mechanic to understand with these stims, is that when your cooldown is 15 seconds, that is actually 15 seconds from the time that the stim runs its course. So as soon as the stim fades its effect on you, then that timer will start and not a second sooner. So you have to take into account that you have 20 seconds of stim and then 15 seconds of cooldown. But this is a very, very short cooldown, and it only has 20% toughness regeneration and 4% damage taken. What if I wanted to make something that's a little bit more intense, and let's say spend half of my points? What would that look like? Well, I could come over here in this right side tree and take 12% strength, and then I could choose to further invest in another 8% strength for a total of 20% strength and 15% crit chance with Voltaprine. Or I could go for this Wildfire 4 and 5 for an extra 35% finesse, or I could go for 15% rending. The choice is up to you, and it depends on what weapons you're going to use in order to hit that optimal blend. Now this makes my cooldown 44 seconds, which means that in addition to the 20-second time that my stim will be running, I'll have another 44 seconds to wait before this thing is back up. However, there are talent tree points that you can take that will lower this stim cooldown drastically, and if you're going for a very, very strong cocktail, I highly recommend that you get into that for reasons we'll look at in a second. Now let's explore the other two trees, which are perhaps my favorite trees. Down here, we've got Spur, which is going to give you attack speed and weapon swap speed, as well as stamina cost reduction. And then up here, we can differentiate either into sort of a fleeting fighter with Fervor, dodge speed, movement distance, movement speed. And then we have attack speed with stun immunity and slowdown immunity for a tanky fighter with Spur 5. Or we've got Reflex, which lowers your reload or recoil and increases your reload speed for shooters, which is really, really awesome, and in case you're going for Desperado builds. And then finally, perhaps the most versatile and powerful tree even after the nerfs, which is the cooldown tree. This first 4 nodes in this tree gives you 25% cooldown, and then this last node can give you another flat 25%. So this is 50% additional cooldown reduction, and this can be shared across your whole team with stim supply. Or you could specialize into either one of these two nodes, one of which grants an additional 75% ability cooldown regen for 1 second when you get a melee kill, and the other does the same but for ranged kills. So you'll have to build this stim not only around what your character is using, but potentially, if you're using the stim supply ability, around what the other characters are using. And it gets very, very crazy when you think about the potentials for team synergies there. Now, speaking of synergies with this class and with these stims, we have to go back to the talents and talk about our keystones. One keystone in particular is called Chemical Dependency, and this is the stim user's keystone. This keystone enables you to get an additional 10% ability cooldown reduction every time you stim, stacking up to 3 times. But these stacks only last 90 seconds. So if you think about our stim, if we have allocated all of the points, we have a very, very long cooldown indeed, 75 seconds on top of the 20 seconds that it takes to get this cooldown even started. So this talent will actually expire before you get another cooldown to refresh the buff. That means you're going to have to use talents like Sample Collector here, which can give you some of your stim cooldown back for killing enemies and for killing enemies infected with Chem Toxin. That is just a very, very useful synergy, and there's no question about why it's placed right above this node. Now, the other thing you can do is if you want to run a shorter cooldown stim, you can get additional effects if you can get more of these stims out in less time with this keystone modifier maxed out chems. It makes these stacks of dependency only last 60 seconds, but the max stacks are now 4 instead, which means you can get up to 40% cooldown reduction with this, but you're going to have to be stimming a lot more often, which might mean bringing a stim with less points invested in it. Then we have this node down here, Chem Fortified. Using a stim of any sort replenishes 50% toughness. Additionally, each stack of dependency grants 5% toughness damage reduction. So if you're going for a build where you want a lot more defenses on this class, you could run a stim that is a single defense point here for the absolute minimum cooldown of 15 seconds. Then you would get 50% of your toughness back every time you activate this, and you'd have additional toughness damage reduction, and you'd have everything else maxed out as well, fairly easy, without even probably needing your sample collector. And finally, we have a Chem Enhancer, which can give you up to 15 or 20% crit chance depending on whether or not you took maxed out chems. Every time you use a stim, you're going to gain 5% crit chance, which is very nice and makes it versatile to use across all of the classes that use stims. So if you're a frequent stim user, if you're a drug abuser, this might be a good keystone for you. However, if you are a melee-focused barbarian, you might want to check out this middle keystone called Adrenaline Frenzy. Adrenaline Frenzy gives you stacks of adrenaline when you melee enemies. And hitting an enemy, any enemy at all, is going to give you 1 stack. Hitting an enemy with a critical attack gives you an additional stack for a total of 2. And if you don't hit enemies within 2 seconds, you'll lose a stack every 2 seconds. Once you hit 30 stacks, you will remove all stacks of adrenaline, dropping down to 0, and you'll get 10 seconds of Adrenaline Frenzy, which is 25% melee damage and 10% attack speed, which is a pretty nice buff, but it takes a little while to stack this up unless you're going to take one of these little augment nodes here. You could take Adrenaline Smiter, which will give you your build up pretty quickly as long as you can land Killing Blows. Killing Blows will give 4 stacks of adrenaline on any regular kill and 10 stacks on elite kill, which means you're going to max this out really quickly if you can kill lots of elites, but non-killing blows don't grant anything at all. Same thing applies over here with Adrenaline Assassin. Weak spot hits give 2 additional stacks, meaning 3 stacks, and regular hits, non-weak spot hits, give none. So you need to be accurate with this one in order to get your stacks up. Now down here we've got Stoked Rage, which is going to make that Adrenaline Frenzy, instead of lasting only 10 seconds, last 20. This is a big improvement, and it's going to mean you have way more uptime on this Adrenaline Frenzy, because yeah, it only lasts 10 seconds. It's hard to get 30 stacks within 10 seconds, so this might be a really good investment to keep that uptime up. Then over here, we've got Uncontrolled Aggression, which is going to help you build those stacks. You won't lose them but every 4 seconds. So that really slows the rate at which these will decay. And finally, Adrenaline Unbound. While this Adrenaline Frenzy is active, you can replenish 5% toughness every single second. And that is very good indeed, because this class does not have very many avenues of regenerating its toughness. You will probably like something like this, especially if you've gone for a defensive stim that can multiply the effectiveness of that regen by taking some of these nodes right here. And finally, we have our range keystone, which is Vulture's Mark. Vulture's Mark makes killing a special or elite enemy with a ranged weapon give you a stack of Vulture's Mark for 8 seconds, which stacks up to 3 times. At max stacks, you'll have 15% range damage, 15% range critical strike chance, and 15% movement speed. So you'll be very fast, very evasive, very fleet of foot, and get lots of crits and damage to boot. Additionally, you can get 15% toughness for you and allies in coherency when you get a special or elite kill when you're at max stacks, which is pretty nice. And again, like I mentioned with the middle keystone, it's pretty nice to have that additional toughness regeneration, because the class does not have a lot of avenues to regenerate toughness as other classes do. Now, in terms of modifiers, it has Vulture's Push down here, which means killing elite or special enemies with a range attack knocks all enemies around you backwards. So if you've got a bulwark who's threatening your personal space, you can turn around and shoot a gunner at some distance, and it'll do an AoE shockwave around you, which will stagger the bulwark, and then you can follow up by shooting him in his face. Vulture's Dodge here gives a range critical strikes the ability to grant you full immunity to all attacks for 1 second, which means, hey, you got a crusher's about to overhead you, just start shooting him point blank. If you get a crit, you'll become immune to his attacks and he can't even hurt you. This is really good with certain weapons like the Shredder Auto Pistol, which is absolutely goated on this class. Finally, we've got Patient Hunter, which extends the duration of Vulture's Mark from 8 seconds to 12 and can be very good, especially in games where you do not have as many elites to kill if you're playing on medium or low difficulties. Alright guys, so that is all the keystones, and I believe that just leaves us with 3 things left to discuss: the blitzes for this class. Now, these blitzes are all very cool, and there's one that you all want to see, and I'll save that one for last. We're going to start out with the Blackout Grenade, and oh man, I have to remake my whole skill tree. Or do I? Because one very nifty feature that Fat Shark has introduced with this patch is the ability to right-click to unselect a blitz or an ability, and then re-choose that ability without redoing your entire tree, which is a godsend. So thank you guys for including that quality of life. Blackout is a grenade that is much like the Zealot's throwing knives. You regenerate them by getting kills at close range. These need to be direct hit kills, I believe, so we need to be killing with either guns or melee, not with the bleed effects. And you can get a grenade back every 20 kills you do at close range, with a maximum of 5 or 6 if you take the extra pouches node way down here. Now, these grenades flashbang enemies like this, but they also send them sprawling, and this interrupt is very, very strong. It's a great way to stop potentially lethal ranged attackers or other sticky situations from ending your life very quickly. Got a Crusher who's about to drop an overhead on you? Pocket Sand. Got a Reaper who won't stop shooting you even though you have been meleeing him over and over again? Pocket Sand, and that is the whole ability. And the real nice part of this ability is the fact that you can get it back for free every 20 close range kills. Not very hard for this class to do at all. It also has a very, very solid synergy with this node all the way down here, which is perhaps referentially called Pocket Toxin. Now when we throw a grenade, it's going to apply little stacks of toxin as well. So Pocket Toxin. And you can see 3 stacks of Pocket Toxin is quite a bit indeed. It's nothing to sneeze at and really does make some good work of lots of different unarmored characters. So that's our first grenade, and probably the most uninteresting, which is saying something because that's a pretty good grenade. Then the second one we're going to check out here is the Chem Grenade, which applies this damage over time field on the ground when you throw it. Now it has a maximum stacks of 3, which can be extended to 4 with the extra pockets node way down there, and this AoE does some serious damage to enemies within its radius. I mean, this thing lasts all day, and it stacks up to 6 stacks of toxin on these characters, which, as you can see, really chunks them quite quickly. So if you can force the enemies into an engagement on your territory within this stuff, it's going to be very devastating. Additionally, once they die, they explode, and that explosion does stagger nearby enemies, so it's a great way to break up hordes and cause even really dense hordes to disrupt themselves. So we really, really like this. I think this is probably going to be the selection for Havoc game modes because of that density and the amount of time that you can get enemies to fight in that pool and just the amount of damage it does straight up. And you know I gotta save the best for last, guys. That's right, the one you've all been waiting for. The Boombringer. The literal RPG in your FPS. That's right, the rocket launcher in Darktide. It's real, and he does this to Crushers. Yeah, he's gone. He's out of here. But what if you wanted to shoot some unarmored enemies? Yeah, it's got a nice splash radius on that, and elites don't stand a chance either. This thing is exactly as destructive as you'd imagine it would be, and a little bit more. My favorite little touch is that it leaves its spent rocket tube in the environment just wherever you throw it down, so you end up with just piles of these. And you can see I've been having some fun in here for a while. But that reminds me, I want to get in another couple hours of rocket launchering enemies before I have to go to bed tonight, so we should probably wrap this video up, huh? As a reminder, guys, this class is going to go live on the 2nd of December, and if you can't wait to try it out with me, you should go down in the description and wishlist it through my link. Thank you, it helps me get some extra keys to share with the community, and thank you again to you all for watching and to Fat Shark for sponsoring. I'll see you out there on the fields, and until next time, mystery out. Bye-bye.